Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. In today's video, we are going to discuss about a recent phenomena related to oceanography which has made the news headline, that is the fourth phase of global mass coral bleaching has begun or is going on in many parts of the ocean. So in this video, we are going to discuss in details about what are corals, what are coral reefs, what do we mean by the term coral bleaching, and what are the major factors that result into coral bleaching, as well as the likely impact of this on our what we can say ocean biodiversity. So to give you the context of this particular topic, recently the National Ocean and Atmospheric Administration, also called as NOAA of United States Department of Commerce, it has stated that the fourth phase of global mass coral bleaching has been triggered due to the rise of ocean temperature, likely due to the effect of global warming. Now this could have serious consequences for the ocean life as well as millions of people, especially the communities living in the coastal areas of the world and are dependent on the ocean for their livelihood. For example, fishermen communities are the one who are going to have also a significant impact on their life. So basically these people who are dependent on food, dependent on jobs, as well as dependent on defense against the natural hazards, natural disasters, all these are going to have a serious consequences because of the bleaching. Now, since mid-March 2023, it is believed the average SST sea surface temperature has remained abnormally high, and nearly 90% of the extra heat that is trapped by greenhouse gases. You know that since industrial revolution, the concentration of greenhouse gases are continuously rising in the atmosphere. Most potent of those being the carbon dioxide. And if you compare the figure, in pre-industrial revolution time, the average concentration of carbon dioxide was 295 parts per million, and as per the recent studies, it has increased up to 420 parts per million. So this rise of greenhouse gases that is happening in atmosphere when Earth loses its heat in the form of long wave terrestrial radiation is trapped by these gases, and as this is trapped, what happens? Atmospheric temperature rises, and since 70% of your Earth is made up of ocean, this atmospheric temperature is further, atmospheric heat we can say, is further transferred to the oceans of the Earth, and that is what has resulted into increase in the sea surface temperature. So nearly 90% of the extra heat trapped by GHG has been absorbed by the ocean. That is why they have become so warm in nature. So this is how we can understand the reason behind this kind of phenomenon. Now let us try to understand what are corals before going into what are coral bleaching. Now corals are very microscopic, very small sized marine animals, marine organisms who live in a very large colony of millions and millions. So they are sweet sea dwelling creatures, sea dwelling animals, and also they are called as sessile. Sessile means what they do, they want to hatch onto something, hatch means latch onto something basically, and then they grow in certain areas. So that is why they can grow only in shallow water where they can attach to the seabed and then further grow in the upward direction. And for this purpose they use, as you can see from this diagram, they have hands that resemble like tentacles. So these tentacles are used to attach as well as catch the food from the water and sweep into their mouth. Each coral individual is referred as polyp, and they live in a large colony as we have discussed. Now corals are of two types, one are hard corals, other are soft coral. It is the hard coral who are responsible for formation of coral reef, because the exoskeleton or outer shell of a hard coral is made up of calcium carbonate, and this calcium carbonate is the building block of the coral reefs. So what are coral reefs? Now as we have discussed, hard corals are the one which are having exoskeleton made of calcium carbonate. So when the polyps die, obviously what will happen? They will settle at the bottom of the sea, and as they settle at the bottom of the sea, from those individual polyps, their exoskeleton, their outer shell start to fuse together, and as their outer shell start to fuse together, it forms a platform of calcium carbonate, that is limestone, followed by the next phase when we have the sinking of the next phase of corals who are dying. So gradually what happens, we have the cementation of the bodies of corals one above other, leading to formation of a thick platform like a structure that we refer as coral reef. coral reef has very high biodiversity. Actually, the animal phyla of the coral reef is believed to be even higher in number as compared to the tropical rainforest of the world. And that is why many geographers refer corals as the rainforest of the sea or rainforest of the ocean. And these coral reefs are not a new or recent phenomena. They have been living in the ocean. They have existed on the earth since almost 450 million years. So, very vital for sustaining the ocean biodiversity, ocean ecosystem. That is how we can understand the significance of corals. On the other hand, if we talk about the corals, so obviously they have a crucial role in sustaining the marine ecosystem. They are a very important part of the marine food chain as well as marine food web. And thus thousands of marine species can be found living in one single reef. And that is why these reefs, whenever you look at the healthy reefs, they look so vibrant, colorful, rich of life. It is because they support very high number of animals and plant species. An example we can take of the largest coral reef of the world, that is Great Barrier Reef, which has developed along the eastern coast of Australia, northeastern coast of Australia, extending for over 3,000 kilometers. This single reef contains more than 400 coral species, 1500 fish species, 4000 mollusk species and 6 of the world's 7 sea turtle species. That is how vibrant this entire Great Barrier Reef ecosystem is there. Also, researchers have shown that there could be millions of undiscovered species of organisms living in and around the reef area. So, that is how we can understand the significance of coral. Not only that, even they play a very important role for the humans as well. For example, economic goods and services worth about $375 billion each year is what is provided by the coral reefs. Food and income, we talk about more than 500 million people across the world depend on coral reef for the food and income, especially as we discussed the coastal communities. Coastal protection also it provides, because whenever very strong ocean current or very strong cyclonic currents are there that is flowing toward the coastal areas in the form of waves, in the form of storms, in the form of coastal floods, all these are being absorbed by the coral reef, which prevents loss of life, property damage and soil erosion. And that is something that is also being taken into account while framing the disaster management policies across the world, especially around the coastal areas. One of the best way to prevent such kind of disaster, and not prevent, we can say to minimize the impact of such disaster, is either to grow mangrove vegetation where it is possible, or if not, then actually we should try to increase the coral reef density in that area. Therefore, the absence of coral reefs would not only result in severe ramifications for marine life, but also for humans, as evident from these discussions. Now, what is coral bleaching? So, simple terms we can understand, as I told you, hard coral's outer shell is made up of calcium carbonate. So, naturally the color of coral is obviously white. However, corals live in a state of symbiosis or symbiotic relation, which also is referred as mutualism, and they have established this relation with an algae species, and these algae species are called as zooxanthellae algae. So, corals provide residence for zooxanthellae algae on their outer surface, and in turn, as algae are autotrophs, they make the food, and this food is shared with the corals. That means corals provide shelter to the algae provide food to the corals. So, both are deriving benefit from each other. This relationship called as symbiotic relation or mutualism. So, as long as both are living in a kind of sustainable or healthy conditions, corals will look very vibrant, rich in color, because the algae are imparting colors to corals. However, whenever situation becomes stressed, whenever the what we can say, the surrounding parameters such as temperature, salinity, pollution, all these changes, corals become stressed and they expel the algae, as you can see, from their outer shell. So, as the algae leave the corals, corals return back to their natural color, which is white. So, the discoloration of coral due to the leaving of algae are what we can call as coral bleaching, that happens due to the coral stress. Now, what is the impact of bleaching? So, obviously, as the algae are responsible for providing food to the corals. Obviously, if the situation does not become normal fast, it reduces the reproductivity of corals and makes them more vulnerable to fatal diseases. Fatal diseases are, for example, white band disease, black band disease, as well as the coral plagues. Global mass bleaching is a term which we use when significant coral bleaching is confirmed in all the three major oceans of the earth, that is Atlantic, Indian and the Pacific Ocean. We are not taking into consideration the Southern Ocean or the Arctic Ocean because 95% of the global coral is found within the 30 degrees south to 30 degree north latitude, that is in tropical zones. So, Arctic and Southern Ocean both are outside of that zone. Now, first mass bleaching was observed in 1998 when 20% of world's reef areas suffered bleaching level heat stress. Then second mass bleaching happened in 2010 where 35% of reef is affected. Third mass bleaching that has happened between 2014 to 2017 where 56% of reefs have been affected. And currently if we talk about, we are in the fourth phase of bleaching, and in this fourth phase of bleaching nearly 54 countries across the world, from Florida in US, Saudi Arabia to Fiji, extending all the way from Atlantic Ocean to Indian Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, they have confirmed bleaching, and about a third of the reefs that has been surveyed by the air have showed prevalence of very high or extreme bleaching event, and at least 3/4, that means 75% of these this surveyed reef have shown some extent of bleaching. This was also confirmed in Western Indian Ocean, including Tanzania, Kenya, Mauritius, Seychelles, as well as off the western coast of Indonesia. And that is why in total more than 54% of world's coral area has experienced bleaching level heat stress in the past year itself, as we have discussed, due to the high prevalence of sea surface temperature, and number is expected to increase about 1% per year. So, not only the current phase is the fourth phase of the global mass coral bleaching, but it is also going to be the most devastating bleaching event that the coral reef of our oceans have witnessed in its entire history. The key driver being obviously the higher ocean temperature, and this has been exacerbated or aggravated by the prevalence of El Nino, that is unusual warming of the ocean surface water near the South American coast of the eastern Pacific Ocean. And El Nino, however, now is weakening and cooler La Nina is replacing El Nino. Then some of the geographers are hopeful and are optimistic that this change in weather phenomena from El Nino to La Nina may set in by the end of this year. And this event may not last very long, that is El Nino may not last very long, and then the situations can become better for the coral reefs. However, apart from global temperature rise in the salinity level, ocean acidification due to increase in the pollutant level of the atmosphere, coral diseases such as white band, black band, coral plagues we have discussed, as well as marine pollution due to the increased transportation traffic that is happening through the ocean routes can also contribute to the global mass coral bleaching. And thus, what we can say, in the future, it is quite possible that the entire world may lose the vast majority of coral reef if temperature increases by 1.5 degrees Celsius, and almost entirety of the coral reef can be lost if temperature rises by 2 degrees Celsius. Currently, the average global temperature of Earth has increased by at least 1.1 degrees Celsius since 1850, and if we want to limit the global atmospheric temperature rise to less than or up to 1.5 degrees Celsius, we have to bring the entire greenhouse gas emission happening from the world to a net zero level by 2050, which is the target given by the Paris Agreement Conference of Parties meeting that has happened under UNFCCC. However, this looks almost unachievable and unlikely to be achieved, as record level of GHG emission have continued to be emitted into the atmosphere even after the Paris Agreement of year 2013. So, this is what we have to understand about the future. So, that is all about the fourth mass coral bleaching event and the impact effect of coral bleaching, as well as what are the coral reefs and corals, that all we have covered in essence in this particular video. Thank you very much.